Thank you, John and Haymarket. On behalf of PARCEO, I am so pleased to welcome everyone to the launch of our curriculum on anti-Semitism from a framework of collective liberation. This curriculum is rooted in a deep commitment to mutuality, solidarities, and joint struggle in our work to challenge anti-Semitism and all forms of injustice. I'm Nina Mehta, one of the coordinators of this initiative and co-director of PARCEO, a resource and education center that partners with organizations and institutions to strengthen our collective work for justice. One of PARCEO's key areas is community education, which includes the development of a range of participatory curricula, including most recently our work with Nadia Sa and Project 48 on the Palestinian Nakba curriculum, and this curriculum on anti-Semitism from a framework of collective liberation. The idea of this curriculum grew out of many, many conversations with educators, scholars, and social justice organizers. All agreed on the value and the timely need for this undertaking in relation to anti-Semitism and the growth of white nationalism and white nationalist violence that impacts Jews, Muslims, Black people, immigrant communities, trans and queer people, and many others. The misuse of anti-Semitism and charges of anti-Semitism directed at those fighting for justice for the Palestinian people adds another layer of urgency to this project. Further, we are all too aware of anti-Semitism education that isolates and exceptionalizes anti-Semitism and dangerously misrepresents what anti-Semitism is. In contrast, this curriculum hopes to build from and contribute to the broader work for justice and resistance happening in so many ways across the country and globally. And we couldn't have asked for a more wonderful team of project advisors and community reviewers, many on this program, together with others who have also helped to guide the project. And I'm also extremely lucky to work and share in so many meaningful ways with my co-director at PARCEO, Donna Neville, whose wisdom and vision really helped frame and develop this whole project, including bringing together so many people with whom there are long and deep relationships of trust and loving collaboration. So I'd like now to share with you just a few slides from the curriculum. And John, can you please put the first one up? The curriculum, which includes articles, poetry, visuals, videos, music, and other resources, is geared towards many different communities, and we offer several modes of engagement for workshops and classes. And slide number 2, please. Here are just some of the topics in the curriculum. And slide 3, please. In the first part of the curriculum, we discuss and make visible different Jewish histories based on class, race, geographies, and other experiences. Next slide, please. And through conversation, exploration, and participation, we ground this curriculum in a framework of and a commitment to collective liberation. And next slide, please. Through analysis of texts, we put forth a contextual understanding of history, and this allows us to understand how anti-Semitism impacts different communities at different times and in different ways, and also how it connects and intersects with other targets and forms of violence. And slide 6, please. We look at anti-Semitism in the US historically in relation to immigration and social, economic, political, and racial realities. And we see current forms of anti-Semitism, including white nationalist violence, tropes and stereotypes, philo-Semitism, among other forms. And next slide. In our exploration of what anti-Semitism is, we also know how important it is to understand what it is not. The misstating and distortion of what anti-Semitism is, by falsely conflating it with criticisms of Israel and Zionism, furthers political goals that are harmful to our work for justice, including that of ending anti-Semitism. Slide 8, please. And we look at examples and imagine how we can build strong, principled relationships, solidarities, and movements for justice. And next slide. Now we will share just a few very short video clips taken from our longer, rich roundtable conversations that we've created for the curriculum. And you can play the video now, please.
And the one other thing I wanted to mention in terms of background is that my entire life, I've lived in places where Jewish communities are pretty strong and large. And I wanted to mention that because one of the things I learned at JVP, at Jewish Voice for Peace, is that it's a very different experience to be Jewish in a place in this country where there are small or non-existent communities of Jews. And so my sense of sort of self-confidence or safety as a Jewish person, I think has been very informed by that sense of belonging and that sense of protection and that sense of acceptance that you can have in a place where I live in New York City, where it doesn't feel weird to be Jewish. But other people in this country don't have that perspective, and I'm very aware of that.
And we know that a lot of the statistics, for example, that Panelist puts forward, they are anti-Palestinian statistics. In other words, people report incidents that have to do with feeling threatened by Palestine solidarity actions and utterances. So, you know, the idea that anti-Semitism, and I don't want to diminish the fact that it really is growing, and we have evidence that it's growing, and that the white supremacist right here in Canada is actually quite big and growing. But you know what? There's a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot that gets obfuscated. And I think it does the struggle against anti-Semitism no favor whatsoever to disseminate information that is not accurate.
To end anti-Semitism is to end white supremacy. You cannot. So we refuse to allow incidences of anti-Semitism, accusations of anti-Semitism, an analysis of anti-Semitism, our histories of anti-Semitism to be co-opted in service of racism. We say no. We say absolutely not. And as part of our work to disentangle the false conflation of Judaism and Zionism, it is essential that we disentangle the false conflation of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. So I am deeply grateful for everyone doing this work in all the ways in which you are.
In many instances, we're still struggling with genocide on so many levels and so many fronts. So I see us building collaborative movements for collective liberation for all our people. And if and until we're able to do that, then we'll continue to be like the gerbil on the wheel, just continue running around in this circle.
I often look to the quote from Mozambique freedom fighter Samora Machel about what solidarity means, is that it's unity of people fighting across different terrains towards the objective, right? And so that's how I understand the fight against anti-Semitism, homophobia, patriarchy, racism, colonialism, all in that we are truly fighting from different terrains towards the same objective, where everybody could live to their fullest potential, right? Free of the shackles of oppression, institutional, systemic oppression in particular, right? So that we could be able to envision a world where we can also work and build a different type of place that is actually beyond even what we can imagine in this moment.
These clips and the slides that we just shared are just a small taste of the materials from our participatory curriculum that is full of space for reflection, conversation, deep thinking, and critical engagement. And now to continue our program that further reflects this process and project, we are thrilled and very appreciative that scholar and activist Professor Robin D.G. Kelly will offer an opening and moderate this evening's panel. We are also so fortunate that Robin, whose work and writing are so inspiring, is one of our community reviewers for the curriculum. Thank you so much for being here with us, Robin.
Thank you. I was about to intervene because like no long introduction. Thank you very much. Anyway, it's such an honor to be here with this amazing panel. A few remarks at the beginning. You know, we all know that incidents of anti-Semitic violence have reached record levels and continue to rise, but so has anti-trans violence and anti-trans bills in state legislatures. We've seen an uptick in attack on migrants and Black people being killed left and right. At least 42 states have passed laws prohibiting or limiting the teaching of race, racism, gender, or anything considered divisive. You have conservative activists are banning books. Of course, this is the week for banned books from libraries and schools. Ron DeSantis used the power of his office to take over the state's progressive public liberal arts institution, New College, in order to turn it into a kind of conservative Christian college. And by the way, that's the same Ron DeSantis whose war on woke and draconian curricular reforms found inspiration in the Knesset's 2011 law prohibiting the teaching of the Nakba, or even mentioning it in school textbooks. Meanwhile, all this is happening as outraged liberals demonstrate over the demise of academic freedom. Fatima Musa Muhammad faced death threats for criticizing Israel in her commencement address at CUNY Law School, the graduation this past spring. She condemned the illegal occupation, settlement building, the violent raids in Jenin and elsewhere, and described Israel as an apartheid state, for which she was labeled an anti-Semite who should be banned from practicing law. Democrats and Republicans, remember that, proposed cutting funding to CUNY, and one Republican congressman actually introduced the quote-unquote Stop Anti-Semitism on College Campuses Act that would defund institutions permitting organizations or events that criticize Israel or Zionism. And remember, even the left-leaning Nation magazine, leading voice against right-wing war on academic freedom, ran an especially vitriolic article accusing Muhammad of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is too often deployed to shut down movements and ideas as opposed to oppressions of many kinds, ideas and movements committed to collective liberation. And so part of what we're here today is to talk about this amazing curriculum, which is involved in the practice of restoring anti-Semitism to its rightful place, opposition to anti-Semitism, to its rightful place. And that is fighting anti-Semitism is part of the broad struggle for planetary liberation. And so that's why we're here tonight, to celebrate the release of the curriculum on anti-Semitism from a framework of collective liberation. And I just want to end by just closing with Donna Neville's words from a letter she wrote in the New York Times, which I think just sums up everything. And she wrote, we cannot understand anti-Semitism in isolation from other forms of injustice, but rather we need to deepen ways to collectively resist state sanction and other forms of violence and strengthen one another, as so many are doing. So with that, let me introduce our speakers for this evening, and I'm going to ask questions, a two-part question to them. So in order of their speaking, we're going to begin with Leslie Williams, who is an activist and educator against racism, Islamophobia, and anti-Palestinianism. She serves on the boards of Jewish Voice for Peace, Jews Against Anti-Muslim Racism, and also on the steering committee for the International Jewish Collective for Justice in Palestine. Jamil Dakwar is a human rights lawyer and chair of Adalah Justice Project's advisory board and founding lawyer of Adalah's, the Legal Center for Arab Minority Rights in Israel. After that, we'll hear from Abby Saul, who is an early childhood educator and graduate, fairly recent graduate of Swarthmore, where she was a core member of Students for Justice in Palestine. She joined Teaching for Change in 2018 and does a lot of social media work for the Zen Education Project and Social Justice Books. And finally, the great Reverend Nile Fort, who's a minister, social justice organizer, and scholar. He is currently an assistant professor of African American and African diaspora studies at Columbia University and does faith-based organizing with the Dream Defenders. So that's a lot. So let me just throw out the questions here. First, as we think about challenging anti-Semitism, and specifically challenging anti-Semitism from a framework of collective liberation and freedom rooted in a commitment to true solidarity with one another, one, what are some of the most important considerations to keep in mind? And two, just in light of your own organizing backgrounds, how and why do you believe a collective liberation framework can further our work for justice? And what are the challenges you see? Okay, so we will begin with Leslie.
Thank you so much, Robin. And I too am absolutely thrilled to be part of this amazing panel and to be working on such a powerful and transformative project. So I'm going to go back a couple of years. In October of 2018, there were not one, but two horrific ethnically charged murders in the United States by white supremacists. The Tree of Life synagogue shooting in Pittsburgh and the Kroger shooting of African Americans in Jefferson, Kentucky. Now, understandably, the primarily white Jewish community in the United States was shocked, outraged, and expressed a profound sense of betrayal and terror, asking themselves, how could this happen in the America that was the promised land for their European ancestors? Yet for me, as an African American and a Jew, there was sorrow, but no surprise. As I wrote at the time, for Black people, America is not the promised land, but Pharaoh's Egypt. Black people do not need to be reminded by hoods and swastikas that we live in a dangerously racist country. While for white Jews, Nazi symbols evoke a terrifying, traumatic past, for African Americans, they evoke a terrifying, traumatic, and unending present. I feel no more fear, no more rage, no more terror after Pittsburgh than I have felt every day as a Black person in this country. But what troubles me about the standard ways we talk about anti-Semitism is the focus on these specific horrifying incidents, as opposed to the tapestry of systemic racism at work every day in our society. When the Anti-Defamation League recites its annual list of anti-Semitic incidents, often as an argument for greater surveillance and increased policing of Black and brown communities, and for the silencing of Palestinians and Palestinian advocates, what is notable is what gets left out. What gets left out is the everyday violence of white supremacy, of racialized poverty and deportations, the abandoned schools in crumbling Black and brown neighborhoods, the food deserts and disparate health outcomes, the murders in police custody and at the border. And I wonder, why must the focus on anti-Semitism often seem to come at the expense of addressing systemic racism? Many of the anti-Semitism analyses we see describe it as both eternal and cyclical, as the world's oldest hatred, or as a recurring virus. The focus is typically on European Jews, ignoring the experiences of millions of Jews from the Middle East, Africa, Asia, and the Americas. By centering the European and European American experience, these narratives ignore the Jewish connections to other marginalized populations and squander opportunities for allyship. Such narratives also downplay the power of white privilege in the American Jewish experience, often blaming people of color for not supporting Jewish struggles against anti-Semitism, while ignoring or sometimes even embracing white supremacy and Islamophobia in their own communities. In fighting anti-Semitism, are white Jewish communities looking at how their own institutions have not only failed to challenge, but in some cases have been openly complicit in preserving white privilege? This is why I was thrilled to be asked to join PARCEO's work on an anti-Semitism curriculum from a framework of collective liberation. Instead of viewing anti-Semitism as an eternal and unique phenomenon, instead of treating it as an exceptional form of bigotry, it is absolutely critical that we look at its roots in white supremacy and colonialism. Not only will this give us a more accurate understanding of anti-Semitism, it will also allow us to create true solidarity amongst other racialized and marginalized people. When the response to anti-Semitic attacks is to hunker down and turn inward, or worse, to call on the powers of government and security forces for protection, not only does the white Jewish community lose out on opportunities to connect, but they endanger potential allies. It would behoove the white Jewish community to ask, is the perceived safety of people who look like you worth the continued oppression, incarceration, and murder of people who look like me? Rather than insisting on the exceptional and separate nature of anti-Semitism, we must acknowledge that it is yet another manifestation of the central evil of white supremacy. Too often, the insistence on the exceptional nature of anti-Semitism and its supposed uniqueness and eternal persistence serve to diminish the pain of anti-Black racism, Islamophobia, and anti-indigeneity, tragically misrepresenting the dangers they all pose. We cannot fight them in isolation, and we cannot keep pretending that any form of racism is more pernicious or more eternal than any other. I am excited to see how the PARCEO curriculum can change these unhelpful narratives and lead us to true collective liberation and solidarity.
Oh, Jamil.
Thank you for having me. It's really an honor and pleasure to be part of this panel and to support this an incredibly important project. I see this as a really groundbreaking curriculum and project because it is starting from the bottom up. It's really starting with the people, the organizers, the communities, different backgrounds, different marginalized communities and activists who are working day in, day out for justice in different contexts and opposing different threats. But while at the same time, bringing them together to see this common threat that is attack on Jewish people because they're Jews. And I think that is something that is not always seen as part of a collective effort. It's seen as an isolation, as if an attack on Jews or Jewish communities is something that doesn't really have to affect us. And in the truth of the matter, the way I see this happening, this phenomena, this very serious and heinous, some of its crimes, whether it's hate crimes, where it develops hate crimes, or even less than hate crimes, when it's a hate against Jewish people. It's something that threatens all of us, particularly marginalized communities. I think it's not a coincidence whenever Jewish people are being scapegoated, attacked, and being discriminated, and there's attack on other marginalized communities. And I think the examples that you heard earlier illustrate that. So I come to this and I look at this from my background, and I'll talk about my background as Palestinian, but more about my background as a human rights activist and advocate and lawyer. I see the struggle against anti-Semitism as a struggle against racism. And anti-Semitism is one form of racism that should be abolished, should be combated, and should be something that we all see as part of the attack on all values of equality and inclusion. But more importantly, I see it as an affront to human dignity, and as an affront to human dignity, and as a real violation, gross violation of one of the very fundamental precepts of international law on human rights, particularly non-discrimination. It is when anti-Semitism happens, when there's an attack against Jewish people, it is stripping people of their dignity, their human dignity, and they're degrading them, and in a way that it really is an affront to human dignity at the very severe level. And so when I look at the struggle against anti-Semitism, it can be isolated from all other struggle against racism. I think the attempt over the last 20 years plus to deny the connections that has been made and were made during the Durban Conference Against Racism to combat all forms of racism, including anti-Semitism, including Islamophobia, including other forms of hate and intolerance, was a concerted effort in order to create some sort of a way of using anti-Semitism in order to serve a political purpose. And here, when it comes to my identity as a Palestinian American, as Palestinian activist, as someone who I think this project is so important because it allows this perspective to think about collective liberation from perspective of all people who could be affected by racism, including anti-Semitism. It is not directed at me, anti-Semitism directly, but it is ultimately is going to harm my cause for justice as Palestinian. Member of Palestinian people, even living in the diaspora. So I believe that this is so critically important that we think about this as part of the project of solidarity between peoples and building a future that where people can thrive and live without fear, and that I can take action against anti-Semitism as part of my role to denounce and act against all acts of racism, and not to create those exceptions and definitions that will make me that will make me not worthy of the ability to advocate for my rights and to advocate for my brothers and sisters and neighbors who are affected by this hate and discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Abby.
Great. Thank you all so much for having me. I'm just so deeply grateful to be a part of this project and for this project to finally be out in the world. It is so sorely needed. So one of the things I've been thinking about are the stories we are all told about anti-Semitism. Growing up as a white Ashkenazi Jew, I was always told that people have always hated Jews, will always hate Jews, and there's nothing we can do about it. Not only is that narrative untrue, it is deeply disempowering. If there's nothing we can do about it, why would we partner with other communities? And if there's nothing we can do about it, we're just stuck. So I'm thinking a lot about how the stories we tell matter, and how the process we go about doing this work matters, and how our actions matter. Leslie brought us back a few years ago to 2018. I also want to take us back to 2016, when the Jews of Color, Sephardi, and Mizrahi Caucus partnered with Jewish Voice for Peace, put out a solidarity statement with the Movement for Black Lives, calling upon Jewish institutions and Jewish communities to take action and stand in solidarity with the uprisings that were taking place at the time. And unfortunately, but maybe not surprisingly, mainstream Jewish institutions responded either with a resounding no or a deafening silence. Folks can decide for themselves which of those is worse. And I think that speaks so much to the current state of our Jewish institutions and our Jewish community, how insular and inwards we are looking, our inability to form partnerships not only with communities outside of our own, but also forming partnerships and supporting and fighting for the most marginalized members of our own community, our own Jewish community. So I come to this work, as Robin said, as a former student organizer, as well as an early childhood educator. So like Jamil said earlier, I'm always thinking about things from the bottom up and imagining the amazing possibilities. Imagine what would happen if, instead of being taught from within the womb practically that anti-Semitism was eternal, that we were taught that it was part of a structure of power, a part of white supremacy, and that there was something we could actively do to dismantle it. What are the possibilities? If instead of having to unlearn things in college or beyond, we taught children from a very young age that this is the reality of what's happening and that there's something they can do about it. Beyond my work as an early childhood educator, I also work with Teaching for Change, an organization that has really been on the front lines of fighting against the current backlash against so-called critical race theory and against truth-telling in education. Like Robin said, lawmakers in at least 44 states have already introduced legislation trying to ban such truth-telling. We can absolutely see the connections with just discussing the truth of anti-Semitism as well. So imagine just the amazing possibility of this curriculum being out there, not only from the ground up, having very young children learning and exploring these key concepts of fairness and justice and how we can treat one another and grow with one another in a truly beloved community. And then also we have folks from the other end in middle school, high school, adult education, and beyond also coming into this fight and demanding that they deserve to be taught this true history and demand that they should be taught how we can treat one another and how we can move forward all together. So I'm just really grateful to be here, and I want to emphasize once again that I think one of the most beautiful things about this project is that so much thought has been put into the process of it. Even just seeing the folks who are gathered here today, that they're community members, lawyers, scholars, activists, that the process of creating this curriculum is so intentional, because the future we want to build together is an intentional and beautiful one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Quite inspiring. Now, Nile.
First of all, I just want to show gratitude for you all. I think something unprecedented might have just happened. Everyone stayed on time, and I think that might have been the first time that's happened in my lifetime. Maybe not other folks, but that's mine. So I also want to shout out PARCEO and everyone who made the curriculum possible. As somebody who actually went through the curriculum, I can say personally that it was sort of by far one of the best curriculums that I've ever experienced in my life. And part of the reason why is that it emphasizes a kind of popular education approach. Sometimes things can get so heady, so complex, so confusing. And I just want to say that part of the value of this curriculum, I think, is how in the Black church we say, make it plain. So I want to shout you all out. Two quick caveats. I don't have actually anything unique to say. Everything I say is going to be an echo of Dr. Robin D.G. Kelly and Donna Neville, my mom and my dad, and my partner, Derica Purnell. And she actually says something that I think is directly relevant to this curriculum. There's a narrative, you may have heard it in the culture. It says, rooting for everybody that's Black. And Derica Purnell has in her bio on her social media, which you should follow if you haven't already, that says rooting for everybody resisting oppression. And I love that, because part of what she's saying is that a politics of identity in the worst sense will not get us free. And so that's kind of my first point. I want to talk about, to me, the best form of solidarity is not political sameness. In my experiences of going to Palestine, I've had arguments with people who I love dearly, who I think really care, but sometimes have trouble because there's a debate essentially of how closely related our political situations might be. And it becomes a kind of hierarchy of oppression. And I used to get tripped up with that because I didn't always understand every political system or have all of the right numbers. But in my heart, I felt like that wasn't right. And I ended up actually going way back to Sunday school to figure out why that didn't feel right to me. And it was because we believe that all of God's children matter. And so that was really important for me to think about solidarity, not just as political sameness, but as an ethical commitment to liberation for all people. So even if we are not all the same politically, I think that we should have a commitment to one another's growth, survival, thriving, and all of that good stuff. I think also this talks about a political reality, which is we need a very big we. The world is really burning right now in an existential crisis. We can talk about climate change. We can talk about police violence. We can talk about settler colonialism. All of these things that many people on this panel know much better than I. But when we think about political solidarity beyond one particular identity or group, it creates space for anyone who cares, no matter what your background is, no matter what your identity is, to come together to join this movement to transform the entire world, not just one particular issue. And I think that's really, really important. speaking about some of those folks who have argued with me about this question of solidarity, they'll sometimes say, you know, Palestinian communities are anti-Black or Jewish communities are anti-Black. And I'll say, I have people in my family who are anti-Black and I can't throw them in the trash. The world, unfortunately, is anti-Black, and it's precisely for that reason why we need to fight. And the other point I'll make really quickly is I think one of the challenges, I work in Black churches and faith spaces, is that a lot of people just really don't know what's happening. It becomes a holy land that is really a result of a religious conflict. So part of why this, again, curriculum is so amazing is that it's a popular form of education that makes it plain and shows that this is not a question of a religious conflict. This is a question of land, of control, of domination, of settler colonialism, and all of those things. And what's so beautiful is that when we really engage the kind of solidarity of liberation that's collective, we not only understand the world, but we understand how to change the world. And so when I was in Palestine about a month ago, we had this wonderful dinner with a Palestinian family. And we talked a little bit about politics while eating makluba, and it was amazing. And before we left, we sang a song. And we sang a song in English because that's what we knew. But the family sang that song with us. And you can see on all of our faces this moment that despite the barrier of language, this connection of culture and spirit was there. And that really inspires me to think about the value of this curriculum in this talk.
I'm sorry, wow, that's very, first of all, the fact that all of you kept on time, that is kind of amazing, especially a minister. Man at the clock. That was so beautiful. I have a million things I'd love to ask you about. Time is really short. So before, let me just ask all of you if you have anything you want to respond to any of the other speakers before making a kind of final comment. Anything you want to add that you've been inspired to add? No? Okay, so what I want to do before we go to our final speaker, I just have one thing I want to say, which is kind of in response to what Nile said, which I think is really, really important, and that is this question of analogy that we have to move past, because what you're saying is we have to move past an analogy and get to what is specific about our movements and how we're actually connected through struggle. And that's another thing that's amazing about this curriculum, that deep connection, and you could see it and hear it in all of your responses. So it was 4:40 my time. And what I'd like to do now, does anyone want to add anything else at this point before I bring Mark on? It's your opportunity. Okay. So we actually may have time at the end for more discussion, but what I want to do now is bring Mark, who is, let me just pull this out. I just lost my place here. There we go. Who's going to close us out with some comments about really the uses of this incredible curriculum. And Mark Sen-Putterman is a prolific author, educator, historian who works on the relationship between U.S. empire and Asian American community politics. He's been active in the Jews of Color caucuses for both Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, as well as Jewish Voice for Peace, among many other things. So Mark.
Thank you, Robin, for that introduction, and to all of our panelists, as well as, of course, everyone at PARCEO whose work made this really important curriculum possible. It's been an honor to play a very small role in seeing this curriculum come together, and to have the chance to kind of tie up this conversation with a few short thoughts that really echo some of the themes that our panelists have already touched on. I really see this curriculum as a gift to our diverse and intersecting movements for liberation. And I think in so many ways, the breadth of perspectives and political movements represented in this panel conversation reflects really the scope of the impact of this curriculum. This resource really represents, in my eyes, a powerful toolkit for our comrades and collaborators in the struggles against anti-Blackness, Islamophobia, Zionism, and beyond to address and defang this weaponization of anti-Semitism against these struggles for justice. Instead, it provides really a rigorous and historically rooted framework for understanding how anti-Semitism exists, not as this abstract recurring concept, but really is embedded within the same systems of racism, white supremacy, and colonialism in which we live. And to reject, these framings that pose the struggles to dismantle these systems as antagonistic rather than as complementary. At the same time, I think something really important about this curriculum is that it's also a gift to Jews on the left who are rooted in struggles for social justice. I think that the curriculum's central framing of collective liberation is really a powerful call to question and expand our notions of collectivity and community. As this curriculum shows, the popular framing of anti-Semitism as cyclical, as a permanent fixture of Jewish life, and as abstracted from other structures of oppression, is really one that has encouraged Jews to see ourselves as alone and isolated in our pursuit for justice. This insular sense of collectivity encourages Jews, as well as other minoritized groups, to seek safety in the arms of colonial states and carceral solutions. And so one of, I think, really the crucial things that this curriculum does is to encourage all of us to see solidarity as a real vehicle for liberation, and to imagine a political collectivity that's rooted not simply in race, ethnicity, or religion, but in our political commitments. And so to close, I want to ask all of us to really meditate on the power and meaning of those commitments, the values, the relationships, and the visions of the future that root us in collective struggle and that bind us as a collective across and not in spite of our differences. And I think that this curriculum is really a beautiful manifestation of those commitments and the collective struggle that proceeds from them. And so I really encourage everyone in attendance to make use of, to take up this curriculum in all of your work. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Mark. Couple things before we close out with Nina. This curriculum, of course, is a product of collective struggle. And that's something that's really, really beautiful. People need to figure out, look up PARCEO, look up some of the folks who are involved in this. But like you were saying, Abby, about what happened in 2016 and also Leslie about what happened in 2018, those struggles produce this moment we're in and produce the curriculum itself. So one of the things we have to remember about the moment we're in, the moment that is on the verge of a fascist response to anti-racist movements, to reproductive rights, to all the struggles that we've witnessed, is that this is also curriculum that might be banned. Dig that. And when that happens in Florida and Texas and Iowa and Arkansas, it's going to be really interesting that the curriculum suddenly becomes a device, a means to mobilize the sorts of movements that would produce a curriculum like this. So it's all dialectical. Anyway, just some thoughts, and I'm just really myself personally happy to be a part of this, to have read it, to have known the folks involved, and to see it flower like it has. So now Nina's going to close us out and tell us what we can do, how we can get access, and how we can move forward. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. You're all so awesome. And really, thank you so much, Robin, Mark, Leslie, Jamil, Abby, Nile, and Donna and Haymarket, really, and everybody watching with us. feel really grateful to all of you for being a part of this and yes, this dialectical process. And please do contact us for more information about the curriculum and our work. I think that John has put or will put in the chat our contact information, both for the anti-Semitism curriculum, which is antisemitismcurriculum.org. And there's an email as well that you can reach us through, and then also PARCEO, which is parceo.org, and a general email there as well. So please do reach out to us for questions or a few ways to think about using the curriculum. We really do look forward to continued conversation and growing solidarities and movements for collective liberation.
Okay, so now we know what we need to do. Get that curriculum, teach it, pass it on, read it, extend it, expand it. I'm assuming it's a living curriculum. So in our collective struggles, we're also going to share ideas and build it up even more. And I just want to make a personal thanks to Donna Neville, who's been such a powerhouse in putting forward these ideas among many, many other things. With that, I want to thank everyone. I love those hearts flying up like that. And hope you have a nice evening. I know some of you had another event to go to. And everyone should just stay in touch. And again, buy Haymarket Books. Bye.
Thanks so much, Robin. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.